Join us now for Education Matters, a weekly look at the real people and real stories in education across North Carolina.
Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm Keith Poston. When the new North Carolina General Assembly was sworn in last week, about a quarter of the 50-member Senate were new. On the House side, 26 brand new members joined, about 20% of the 120-member chamber. That group included 17 Democrats who helped end the Republican supermajority, but a legislature where the GOP remains firmly in the majority. This week, we're joined by 4 of those freshmen, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, to discuss their views on education and their goals for the new session. Before we tackle our main topics, we open with Edlines, our quick scan of education headlines across North Carolina and the U.S. Carver Heights Elementary School in Goldsboro will no longer be taken over by the state's Innovative School District. Last week, the state board reversed its earlier decision and voted to allow Carver Heights to become a restart school and run its own improvement plan. The ISD was created by Republican state lawmakers in 2016 to take low-performing schools away from local school district control and turn them over to outside groups to run. Now, some critics say the model hasn't worked in other states and is a way to privatize public education. A new report shared at the state board last week by researchers from NC State found North Carolina's $150 million Read to Achieve program has produced 0 gains in 3rd grade reading proficiency. The program, championed by Senator Phil Berger in 2012, was supposed to help boost reading achievement. A battery of new tests were added, and the students were to be held back if they fared poorly. The money mostly went for digital devices and summer reading camps. DPI, which administers the program, says it's not recommending any legislative changes to the program, but does plan to work on better implementation. Finally, UNC Chapel Hill will expand its transfer program for community college students by adding new partnerships with Guilford Technical and Central Piedmont Community Colleges. The initiative was made possible with a $1.13 million grant from the GlaxoSmithKline Foundation and will include new support programs for students majoring in STEM fields. Remember, you can visit the Public School Forum's website at ncforum.org, click on Education Matters, and read more about each of these Edlines as well as other topics we cover each week. As I said at the top of the show, there's a lot of new faces in the North Carolina General Assembly this year as a new session convenes, and we are fortunate to have 4 of them join us today, and we're going to introduce you to the first 2. First, we have Representative Julie Von Hafen. Julie represents Wake County, I think parts of Cary and Apex, and we can talk about that. Rachel Hunt is next to her. Representative Hunt is in District 103, Mecklenburg County. Among many communities there, you represent Matthews and Mint Hill. Well, first of all, congratulations on joining the General Assembly. Now, look, you two ladies defeated 2 of the most powerful Republican men in the General Assembly, Representative Nelson Dollar and Representative Bill Brawley. I guess before we get into some of the education things, I mean, did you feel like this was were you part of a sort of a national thing that was going on as far as women getting involved in running? I'll ask you first, Julie.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think that, of course, more women ran this year than probably ever before. We were really excited to have so many women elected this year. And I think especially, I know Rach and I met during the campaign, and we met a lot of the other women that were running for House and Senate. We became a very close group that really relied on each other during the campaign, and it was really great.
Right. What about you, Sam?
Absolutely. We had a huge wave of women that were so upset with the way things have been going in our state and in our country that we just decided to take the ultimate sacrifice and run ourselves. We've all worked on campaigns for most of our lives, I certainly have, and donated, and this was just the step further. And we, like Julie said, had a really strong group of women who, some of whom won and some of whom lost, but we remain close to this day. Right.
All right, well, you mentioned, Representative Hunt, you mentioned you've been involved in working around campaigns. I think that's pretty obvious. For our viewers that don't know, you are the daughter of the original education governor, Jim Hunt, yes. A friend of the show. So you grew up around watching your dad and mom promote public schools and education. So
absolutely.
What's Rachel Hunt's education sort of worldview? Sort of what do you plan to prioritize as a legislator?
Well, I am very interested in making sure we become the progressive state, the #1 state in public education that we once were under Dad's leadership. And his legacy has been decimated by the things that have happened in the General Assembly since 2010, and I'm out to restore as much of that as I possibly can.
Okay, I mean, and I'm going to get into in a minute. I want to talk to y'all about some specific issues. Representative Von Hafen, you were on the show right there in that chair just a little over a year ago, representing, at that point, you were the president of the Wake County PTA Council, and you were talking about the problems that were being created by the K-3 class size mandate. So here we are a year later. You're going to be, part of those kind of decisions. I guess first, is there a through line from your concerns and engagement on that issue and you deciding to run?
Absolutely. That was probably the main reason that I ran. I mean, last year in my work, for the last several years, I've been really involved with public school advocacy. I've been working in the General Assembly on the other side, being up there advocating for teachers and students for the last several years. And especially around the class size chaos issue, I got even more involved, and it was the #1 reason why I decided to run. I was so tired of not being heard, felt that there's many other groups, including teachers, that were not being heard, and I decided to run so I could be on the other side of that situation.
And of course, now being elected, now your decisions are going to be like you're going to be the one getting the criticism or the praise. I'm sure that you probably had some conversations with some of your new colleagues on both sides of the aisle that have probably been a little like, it's some of these things are tough. They're going to be easy and not going to be easy. So like one of the issues, teacher pay. We've seen something. So where do you think we've been, and is that something that you want to dive into as a new member?
For sure. I think that was one of the #1 issues that was talked about, by Rachel, by myself, by many other candidates. I know on the campaign trail, it was definitely something that my constituents and voters talked to me about a lot. I think teacher pay, I always bring it back to respect for teachers. I feel that teachers get a bad rap for, wanting a pay raise, or they always want more money. It's really not about that for teachers. I think it's about the respect that pay brings, and that we need to professionalize, teachers again, treat them as the professionals that they are, and that comes with the pay that they deserve.
Right. Representative Hunt, on the campaign trail, you talked to, I'm sure, teachers, educators, parents.
Yep.
Did they talk to you about things like school funding? Did they have concerns? Is that something that you want to tackle?
Sure.
Not just separate from pay, but just in general, the support for schools.
Absolutely. Everyone has children or is connected to children. Everyone cares about what happens to their children. I talked about this every day at everyone's doors, and I went to mostly unaffiliated and Republican doorsteps. Right. So everyone cares what happens to their children, and schooling is the #1 thing that is important to children. And if we don't have school funding for the buildings, for the teachers, for the supplies, and we don't have any of those now.
Right.
We have to have what children need to get a good education in the state. We owe that to them, and we owe that to our citizens, and that is the only way forward for economic mobility.
Right. Let me, you mentioned going to Republican doorsteps, and one of the education historically has been, a very bipartisan issue. But there are some differences, and one of those are on the areas that under the large umbrella of school choice. Representative Von Hafen, where do you stand, and what are your priorities when it comes to things like charter schools, private school vouchers, virtual charter schools? A lot of those, they're all different, I know, but generally, where do you come down on those?
As a parent, I support parents' rights to have those choices. My kids are in magnet schools, so that's a choice I made for my kids. But I feel that we've gotten away from some of the accountability of some of these programs. They've gotten kind of too big, too fast. I support a reinstatement of the cap on charter schools. And if we're not going to do that, I feel that we need to increase the accountability of schools. The virtual charter schools have been failing, and they keep being extended. And I think that we need to re-examine how we're accrediting charter schools, and also how we're keeping them accountable for their performance.
Representative Hunt, same to you. Sort of, you've got Charlotte's got a lot of charter schools,
Right.
and I'm going to get into the municipal charter in just a sec. But sort of,
Yes.
your take on these vouchers, those things.
Right. So I also feel that parents need to have choices. My son actually went to a charter school for high school, and I worked in it. So I've been inside, and I was the board chair. So I know how charter schools work, how they can work. Some of them don't work well. Many of them don't have the accountability we need. We were at the Hunt Institute yesterday. We had a lady from the National Accountability Board of Charter Schools, a national group, and she explained how some of our charter schools really are not accountable, and our state is not doing a good enough job in holding them accountable and making sure that we close the ones that are not working.
All right, I want to ask you about House Bill 514. We've talked about a lot. This was directly affected you. In fact, Bill Brawley, who you defeated,
Right.
was the sponsor.
Yes.
To allow municipal charter
Yes.
schools. That's law now.
Right.
Are you involved in talking to Matthews, Mint Hill, trying to understand more? What do they want? So there's
Yes.
that specific thing, and then there's a policy. So sort of
Right.
where do you come
Right.
down on this issue?
So I am very involved in talking to folks in Matthews and Mint Hill. That came up some on the campaign trail with parents who were very concerned about what the tax implications would be from 514. This is before it was passed. And I have now met with the mayor of Matthews, and we have talked in depth about how that's going to go forward. Neither Matthews nor Mint Hill have taken further steps to implement that. Cornelius and Huntersville are doing some study groups about going forward with that. So they have just said, the mayor has said that they want to just keep that right now and not use it and not go forward and make it into.
We're almost out of time. Last question for you, Representative Von Hafen. Very positive comments from Speaker Moore about bipartisanship, working across the aisle. You think that's going to happen?
I mean, I think it has to happen. I mean, if we want to pass a budget this year that we all in agreement with and keep the government running, we're going to have to compromise. I'm happy to hear that he's supportive of a school bond because we desperately need that. And so, I think those little steps and his indication that he's willing to work together, I hope means good things for our state.
We do too. Great. Thanks so much for
Yes.
being here,
Thank
both of
you.
you. When we come back, we're going to be joined by 2 new Republicans elected in November. But before we go to break, see if you can answer this question. Lawyers are the most common profession of members of the North Carolina Senate. What is the second most common?
Matters is brought to you each week in part by Paragon Bank, serving others, enriching lives.
Welcome back to Education Matters. Did you correctly guess D, real estate? After lawyers, the next most common profession in the North Carolina Senate is real estate and then insurance. We're going to continue our focus on the freshman class with 2 of the new Republicans that are joining the General Assembly, including one of those insurance men from the Senate. Senator Jim Bergen, Republican, District 12. You got a pretty broad district. Harnett, Johnson, Lee. I know that includes Sanford, Lillington, Benson, and all those areas. So welcome and congratulations on you. Representative Chris Humphrey, District 12, Lenore Pitt, I think that's Kinston, LaGrange, I think are a couple of the places people might know. So thank you. And just so I mentioned the insurance, Senator Bergen, I'll start with you. You're the owner of C&D Insurance, so and you're replacing Senator Rabin, who retired after 3 terms. All right, well, you heard the freshman Democrats that came in, and I really wanted to talk to y'all about education. You spent time campaigning last year. I'll start with you, Senator Bergen. What did you hear from parents, teachers, the community about education if you were to get elected?
But they want to have choice. They want to be able to decide whether their kids are in public school, charter school, homeschool. And I talked to a lot of teachers while I was out campaigning. And the number one thing that they're concerned about is school safety and the amount of paperwork that they feel like they're doing that really doesn't, they don't see the benefit of some of it.
Right. What about you? Same question to you, Representative Humphrey. As you campaign, I should mention you defeated an incumbent 3-term Democrat, Representative George Graham. It was a redrawn district, but just to give people the backstory on how you got here. What did you, as you were campaigning, education, I think folks know the General Assembly has a tremendous amount of influence on local schools. What did you hear from your constituents?
Same thing as Senator Bergen. Being from a rural district, school safety was huge. our schools in Lenoir County and southwestern Pitt are older schools, so we haven't really built as many schools as some of these larger urban areas. And, there's a big rural-urban divide in this state, and, the teachers, they want nice classrooms. I mean, they want nice schools and efficient, and so that was a big issue.
Right.
Testing was another one. I mean,
Sure.
there's too many tests that are forced upon students.
Well, that seems to be an emerging bipartisan consensus. I saw Superintendent Mark Johnson just yesterday pushed out sort of some more details on what he'd like to see. I want to dig into a little bit on this rural thing. I think y'all, the Public School Forum is releasing our top 10 education issues next week, and I'll give you a sneak preview. One of them is going to be a focus on rural unique education challenges for rural North Carolina. And then you mentioned safety. I get you're talking about, that kind of comes a couple of ways. And you're talking about, unfortunately, of course, the horrific shootings and things like that, but also just the facilities. So what do you mean when you say safety? What are you thinking about?
Making it a hard target. We just built a new school in Harnett County this past year, and there's only one way in and out. You have to, every visitor has to go through the office. All the doors are locked so that no one can get in from outside. There's a card scan system that we use. The building can be completely shut down from one point, even a cell phone. And just try to look at those things, not to make it a fortress, but to make it someplace where people know their kids are safe.
Yeah, that makes it. I mean, when we were all growing up, I mean, we're at different ages, but I mean, we had breezeways and I mean, that's the kind of stuff now that you look at and go, unfortunately, we're in a different time.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, you could just walk right in, and anybody could pick up students and that sort of thing. But now, now with just the national noise is really making people more aware. And students, I have a daughter, she's in middle school, 14 years old, and she gets scared some days. She watches the news, and she's in a good school. I mean, it's safe, but you just never know.
Yeah, I understand. Let me, I want to talk about two things we just talked about with the representatives, teacher pay and just sort of school resources and funding overall. I think the Republican majority is rightly proud of the investments that they've made in teacher pay. I'm sure y'all talked about that on the campaign trail. But sort of where are you? Do you think where we need to be on teacher pay? And also, North Carolina right now is ranked 39th nationally in per pupil funding. Where do you, I'll ask with you, Senator Bergen, where are you on that?
Well, I've looked a lot at teacher pay, and the state average right now is about $50,800. I think there's a lot of things we can do. As I said, when I talk to teachers about pay, that is not the number one issue. I think they're teaching because they love it. Teacher pay has never been what I think it should be. I don't think it ever will be. I admire teachers. Because of great teachers, I'm doing what I'm doing now.
Right.
So I want to continue to look at teacher pay. I'll give you an example though, about how there's disparity. I serve as Central Carolina Community College Vice Chair. The average teacher pay in the community college is only $48,800, and all of those folks have their master's degree and are teaching. Something else we ought to do is go back and pay the differential for teachers that have their masters.
So you would support reinstating the master's pay supplement?
I think we need to be continuously encourage education. I want people to be lifetime learners, and I think by encouraging, I've got 3 children, 2 of them already have their masters. I think, and I'm totally supportive of being lifetime learners.
Right. Similar question to you, Representative Humphrey. One of the unique challenges for rural North Carolina is the property tax base and the local funding. And as I think y'all both know, that supplemental pay, I didn't go in and pull all the numbers for your counties, but I can tell you it pales in comparison to what, say, a Wake, a Mecklenburg, Orange can pay. Superintendents tell me that affects their ability to recruit teachers.
Oh, it does. I think Lenoir County maybe 1,800 compared to what, 12,000, 15,000 in Wake or something along those lines. Yeah. But there's a big disparity.
Not quite that high, but yeah, it's significantly higher than those. And we have several counties that have no supplemental pay.
Yeah, and I visited a middle school this summer, and they had Teach for America training there. Mm-hmm. So Teach for America is great for rural counties. It just doesn't really solidify the need for teachers because they turn over.
Right, it's not a pipeline program, but they certainly have been they've been a big, I'm sure, I know in your area too, that's been a sort of a lifesaver for some of those soups.
Yeah, we've got to figure out a way to retain teachers, and you know, there's more work to do, no doubt about it. I mean, the General Assembly last year made some strides, but you know, these folks take care of our kids, they train them, they teach them, and you know, we've got to make sure we take care of them.
Senator Berger, you mentioned school choice, and that was a key issue for you and that you heard from your constituents. Do you have any concerns about accountability or transparency? Do you think we know enough about, let me give you one, this voucher program, the private school voucher. Do you think it's where it needs to be in terms of oversight?
I think a certain percentage of the tax dollar ought to follow the child, whether they go into whatever, even homeschoolers. Homeschoolers spend a lot of money for curriculum and stuff for their children. A lot of them don't want money from the government, though, because they think there'll be strings attached.
Usually.
And there are, but in our county, the school that scored the highest in our county this past year was the charter school. And so, you know, it's the only school that teaches Mandarin Chinese. So I think we need to look at it, but yes, I think everybody needs to be held accountable.
All right, I want to wrap up a similar question that I was asking Representative Von Haven at the end. On the Senate side and on the House side, both leaders made some very positive comments about trying to work together across the aisle. Do you think we can do that?
I think so. I think the school bond discussion is going to bring us together. I think the time is right to take a look at that. I know it's going to cost. We got to figure out how we're going to pay for it, but we've got schools that are crumbling. Like I said, in Lenoir County, we've just got a bunch of older schools that they've been taken care of. They haven't been neglected, but they were built in the 30s, and it's time for rural North Carolina to be taken care of, I believe.
Last word from you.
I think education, you know, is really important. I think people need jobs. That's one of my big things is jobs in rural North Carolina. I want to make a difference up here, and I think relationships are going to be the key to it. I've met with this week I will finish meeting with every secretary, every commissioner. I met with the governor Wednesday, and every one of those cases I'm asking, what can I do to help? And what can we do to make a difference?
Well, thank you both for being here. I hope you'll come back and see us, and good luck, and enjoy your time in the legislature. Do some good for us.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
After the break, this week's final word. Next week's show will be recorded at the Public School Forum's annual Eggs and Issues Breakfast. We have a great panel that's going to talk about the state's top 10 education issues, including North Carolina's Teacher of the Year, Principal of the Year, School Counselor of the Year, and an amazing high school student who was recently selected as a Latinx 20 under 20. One issue we're definitely going to be discussing next week is school choice, like we did today on the show. We've talked a lot about private school vouchers on this show, including serious gaps that we see in oversight for a program that will actually spend about $1 billion in taxpayer dollars to private schools over the next 10 years. One area we've discussed less, though, is actually the largest school choice effort, charter schools. The number of charters in North Carolina has nearly doubled since 2011 when the 100 school cap was lifted by the legislature. They also created 2 virtual charter schools, and last year passed legislation allowing 4 predominantly white Charlotte suburbs to create their own separate charter schools reserved for their residents. Now, all of this is having a significant impact on traditional district public schools in terms of funding, enrollment, and desegregation. Yet we don't really look at any of those issues in deciding to approve new charters. We should. We also don't put a lot of restriction on governance. For example, did you know that now 1/5 of all North Carolina charter schools are run by for-profit charter management companies, and that 80% of them are headquartered in another state? Charter schools were promoted as laboratories of innovation to scale up and improve public education overall. Isn't it time to take a closer look at the actual impact? That's it for this week's show. Thanks for watching, and please tune in next week for our special Eggs and Issues and Top 10 Education program for 2019. Thanks so much.